way, anyone who's on the call today, if you have a question for myself or Professor Marchie during this session, feel free to throw it up in the chat, or I don't have any limitation on this. You can go right on to audio or video, up to you. But in our general Q&A here, we'll start with what can a student that attends a history club meeting expect?
At a meeting, well, based on, I mean, past like an introduction to everything, what we normally do is we build an agenda of items that we want to, connect with for the one meeting each. We were holding meetings every 2 weeks, so we have biweekly meetings. We get together, and that's when we're at our most efficient. We don't normally do that. We would have a meeting like maybe once a month or an impromptu one to set things up, but we have a good time. I've never had a group in the history club that wasn't just there to have fun. And then, on top of that, talk history and all that stuff. But it ends up being, like you said, more of a hangout. When I like Mark, your philosophy meetings, the first half, we were BSing left and right, and then you get to the material. But that's the fun of it, is that the people are there to casually be part of it, but also are interested in the discipline. But they also have things in common, right? So they're venting, and more so now than ever. I mean, it's a lot more of venting and frustration because people are having issues with their classes and they're finding common ground. But when we were normally in our meetings, we were together. We had planned meetings out for maybe like 45 minutes that turned into like 2-hour meetings. And yeah, exactly. You're building relationships. These are people that we're still very much in touch with, and they are in touch with each other. Like we still talk to each other, and they're off at different colleges. They've been graduated now for 4 or 5 years. And they still come back to our stuff. They still involve themselves with the things that we're doing. But we usually tackle agendas. We build up what's going to look like for the semester, what we want to get done, how we want to relate it, and then we start funneling those ideas back to you guys to bring to fruition in our planning. So anything from fundraising to trip development to speaking engagements, films, stuff we want to look at, we cover all of that in the first couple meetings, and then we see it through, and then we start planning for the next year. So we try to work by like March or April. What do we want to do with our entire budget for the oncoming year, and how do we want to plan at least the fall to get it out of the way? And then we're usually 2 months out from each semester running around.
And I mean, obviously it's hard to ignore what's gone on in the world, on a political scale, on a global scale, everything that's gone on there. I'm curious how much in that club you get into discussions like that, because history, again, is shaped by what's happening in the world now and things that we can draw on from the past as well. I'm just curious what those, conversations are like.
Initially, when we were still meeting, and like I said, we've been out of commission for a couple months, but before that, when we met, when this was all starting, it overtook a lot of the meetings, and it's not a bad thing. It's taken time out of my own classes in teaching history that we spend 20, 25 minutes talking about. I mean, we talk about corny stuff, but like also, political, socio-political aspects, the virus, the things that are being impacted by that. So it's something that's an open forum because we are making history. We're living through history. This is stuff that, at 18, 19, 25, 30, 40, 50 years old, you're still going to be able to tell your kids, your grandkids, so on and so forth, that this was a time you lived. And it's not just the craziness of what, happened over the year. It's that how it affected your life, how you lived through it. It's very much real for everybody, regardless of whether or not you had the virus, or everybody's affected some way,
And I know history in a lot of ways humanizes itself in a way, but how much does someone that gets involved in the history club that might otherwise not be the biggest history person, or may struggle at an academic level, excuse me here, join this club, get involved in discussions, meet people, meet folks like yourself, Professor Marchie, and see that it kind of humanizes that, and maybe even sparks some more interest in the area for them, because you realize history is just one word. There's so much more that it encompasses.
History is as in-depth as the tree that's behind you, dude. It's got those kind of roots and branches that spread out, much like philosophy. History is a philosophy. They're probably the two most marriable subjects when it comes to analyzing life. I think from a historical and a philosophical perspective, and it's great that we have the connection of the two clubs like that, is that, and we probably should be working together a lot more often than we do. But we used to be kind of in the same element. Most people who graduate with a history degree are graduating with a philosophy aspiration. We're all philosophical. It's about the what ifs, the whys, and the only way to learn more about history is to employ Socratic method consistently and say, I'm not done yet. I want to know more, and that's why history is always changing. We take it as something that's like concrete. But what I find is that we started to do the trips, the physical trips, because for the people who don't want to sit and listen to lectures or watch documentaries or something like that, being in the actual place and being able to touch the stuff and say, hey, like Gettysburg, for instance, you're walking on that battlefield and you're like, by the way, 150 years ago, 30,000 people died on this battlefield. Think about that. And you're walking the same hallowed grounds that those people did. And those grounds have been untouchable since then. So you're there, and that's where the event happens. I explain to people when I go to Princeton, I rub the ground because I know George Washington's horse walked on those cobblestones at one point in time. And as cheesy as that sounds, for me, it's very connective. It's things that people see firsthand that change their perspective on those particular things. So I think a lot of people leave who are not in history suddenly find themselves kind of intrigued by it. They don't have to become historians or change their major in college automatically by that, but I think about all the people that come from the community that end up getting involved. They like it. Down the road, you tend to appreciate history after you turn like 30, I think people start, I think when people really start, for some people, it starts when you have to pay property taxes and you got to figure out where everything's going. You're like, wait, I need to learn more about this country. But when you start to really take voting seriously and you start to really look at the socio-political aspects of the United States or the country that you live in, I think that's when you start to take things seriously, because if you don't know it and you're just spouting nonsense, you don't know where to go with a conversation. So history becomes quite valuable. So yeah, I would say that a lot of people that are maybe turned off by it or think that they're not good at it or not into it, if they come into a meeting and they hang out with us and they do one of our events or they listen to one of our speakers, it changes their perspective dramatically.
And it's nice. It's funny you mentioned that. I'm looking at Jen. And I'm remembering back to about years ago when when I went on the ACUI conference with her. And I was still a student at OCC, and we ended up going to Princeton for it. And we sat in a room, and the first thing they said to us is Albert Einstein, once upon a time, taught in this classroom. And I just remember how that hit me. You got goosebumps thinking about it. I know we have a few clubs that we want to move on to here. So my last question for you, Professor Marchie, is anyone who's interested in History Club, who would they contact and how would they go about doing that?
I put my email right in the chat there. You can reach out to me directly. I'll put your name on a giant compiled list, which I'll be sending an email out this week to kind of put up 2 sessions that will have similar to this, so that people can break into the meeting and come check us out. And we'll be doing, that'll be our first introduction meeting. So we'll be setting it up now to try to get everybody involved and put our foot down. But for now, you can email me directly at rmarchie@ocean.edu.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for the chat. I appreciate it as well.